carefully. So the Shanti mantra says, may my mind abide in my speech, meaning that only when I talk, the mind should be there. When I'm not talking, the mind has to be silent. Why is the mind silent? Because it is not necessary when you're not speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hariom? Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, Hariom. Then the second one is that may my speech abide in my mind. And that means that whenever you are speaking, the mind has to be an instrument for thought and reflection. It doesn't have a relationship with speech. So when you feel that you want to speak, your mind must be fully there. When you're not speaking, the mind is not there. And again, the same thing is, whatever you are wanting to say, only that should be in the speech. You don't say something that you don't mean to say. You don't say something that you are saying, but in a hurting manner to somebody else. You don't say something which is not true just because you want to pacify the other person. And this, which means a tremendous amount of self-discipline with the speech. So here the sage is saying, he's teaching the children here actually, and he's saying that if you want both these things, you can do it, work very hard, the self-restraint, but however hard you work, it is such a tremendous effort because you have gone through many innumerable millions of lifetimes, and all those experiences are already there in your mind. So if you say something, any of those experiences can color your mind. Now, somebody sent me a WhatsApp yesterday, another Guru Bhai of mine, where an Australian doctor is saying that in Australia, I don't know whether it's there in the other countries, they are taking the regular temperature of every person to see whether they have COVID. Now, the instrument by which they are taking the temperature is like a gun to look at. And that is placed at the eyebrow center. And then they take the temperature. Now she says that because children and other people in that country have seen so many shootings and read about so many shootings at the eyebrow center, that one hit, another person dies. So even when a nurse comes to take a temperature, if the nurse doesn't explain, look, this is how it's for a temperature we are taking, this is not a gun, it doesn't hurt you, don't worry, or you put it somewhere else, it is going to get children into a panic, which has happened now and then in the country. So now why should this child go into a panic if they put a thermometer on the forehead at the eyebrow center? Because it happens to look like a gun, because in some lifetime somewhere, that child could have seen or been hurt by a bullet that went through the eyebrow center. So these are old vasanas that are triggered. And when they are triggered, you can go into panic, you can get anxious, you can get upset, you can get angry, you can get happy. So many things come. So they say, when I am speaking, let my mind be silent. Let it not interfere and give me the old memories. And when I say something, when my mind is there, only what I want to say should come out. Let me not say things that are just reactionary or create reactions. And so they are saying that this, because it's so difficult, you don't know what thoughts can come in your mind or the other person's mind, because you have gone through so many events in your lifetime and so many events have colored your perception. So they are saying the grace of the whole universe is needed, whole of Prakriti. because whole of Prakriti is where your vasanas are there. The vasanas are usually all around you, and we pick up whichever vasanas we want to, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. If you're a yogi, you pick it up knowingly. If you're not a yogi, you pick up some vasana that is around. Somebody may have been in that room and they have been crying. You go happily and suddenly you start feeling sad in that room. That sadness will trigger a vasana of sadness in you that you have experienced in the past. So it is difficult on your own to know all these vasanas. So they say, you are calling for the grace. You say the grace of the whole must be with you to help you in your effort to do these two aspects, where the mind abides in the speech and speech abides in the mind. Then the sage says that speech and mind, he says very respectively, you are the foundations of my knowledge. And he says, don't be disrespectable to mind and speech. When you say some stupid word or something that is a lie, and you know it's a lie, or you know you're going to deliberately hurt somebody, you are hurting your speech and you are hurting your mind. The speech and mind are pure, you're being disrespectful to your mind and speech. And he says, if you're being disrespectful to your mind and speech, which is the foundation of your knowledge, it is like having a ladder that you are using to go up to the higher floor. Along the way, you keep kicking the ladder. What happens? The ladder will collapse or it will break and you will fall down. So he says that never put down your body or your mind. Idam shariram kalu dharma sadhanam. Without your body and mind, your atma cannot evolve. It needs that body and mind to stay inside and evolve. So they are saying, he's praying, he's telling the child, treat your body and mind respectfully. So when you tell your body and mind, please help me, they will help you. They will not let you down. You persuade them to help you to go through this. They are teaching humility, and they're also teaching us the reality of life in every being that is in creation. Not only what we think in our brain, but in our body, the divine is there. Paramatma is there in our mind. It is there in the speech. He is there in the place where you're keeping your feet, the Pancha Mahabhutas. That is why in the ancient traditions, people walked barefoot, because when you walk barefoot, you pick up prana from the soil. When you came into somebody's house, you walked bare feet because it brings in the prana you have picked up into that person's house. The same reason why we eat our food with our hands, because there is prana at the tips of the fingers. And when you eat the food, you're eating the food along with the prana that you have brought in through the tips of your fingers. So when you respect your body, that is, you keep it clean, like the niyamas say, no? Saucha santosha, saucha clean, hygienic. Then the body is healthy, and the body will bring in healthy prana through the hands and the feet. Now, these are the Panchabhutas, the earth. From the soil we get prana. From the water we get prana. That is why we wash our feet and we wash our hands. Usually in the old traditional days, people will tell the children, go wash your hands and feet and come for food. Why? Because water has a lot of prana in it. So when you come and sit down for food, you're bringing that prana with you. And if you have a lot of prana, then you can share it with the other people sitting there also. So this is the Panchabhutas, or the 5 elements, are the earth, the water, the fire. Again, it is very well known that there is a lot of prana where there is natural fire, not electric fire. For example, in the old days in temples and places, people would not use electric lamps. They would not have a tube light. They would just have an ordinary lamp burning in front of the deity. So if you go in the evening also, you might have a dim view, or you can sit and you look. You will have the view, but it is not as much for you to see the deity as much as to get the concentrated prana from the Garbhasthan because of the mantras that have been uttered there and the energy in the place itself. Once you use electric lights for that purpose, over a long period of time, or any electrical matter, the prana comes down. That is why it has been found that wherever you have a lot of electricity, like in factories and industrial areas, you will find people having a lot of depression. Because the lowering of prana makes you feel lowered in your attitude, in your body, your immune system goes down. So knowing this, some of the industries today are making parks and letting the employees go out and walk in the garden or something like that a little bit, once, 2, 3 times in a day, so that they don't lose the prana, so the work becomes more productive. So this is fire. Then air, prana comes through our breath, and space contains all these 5 elements and supports the body. Because if this space was not to support the body, first, you won't have a body, the space of the body. Secondly, if you had the body, it would collapse. So these 5 elements are very, very vital. And out of these 5 elements, the entire creation has been made with combinations and modifications. So you can imagine the power of the cosmic consciousness that we call the Paramatma. Even if you take it in a very physical and scientific, so-called scientific manner, forget there is a God, but imagine that there is a certain consciousness somewhere that takes just 5 elements, and out of these 5 elements makes an infinite number of objects and things seen, unseen, which are modifications and combinations of this one. People, trees, animals, different sort of flowers, different leaves, different fruits, different planets, different universes. So you can see how tremendous that might is. So when we say that we are asking for help or support from that consciousness, then we are talking to the life in that consciousness, and you will be supported. When you think of that universe or that consciousness as a thing, like the breath, you'll say, who will speak to the breath? But you're not speaking to the breath, you're speaking to the prana in the breath. And that prana will stay by you when you call. So we'll go into this on the last day, that is the next time also. We'll carry on with this. So the speech abiding in the mind, mind abiding in the speech, and then the Rishi is saying that you are the foundation, speech and mind, you are the foundation of my knowledge. I learned through you how these things happen, because it's an experiential truth. The students are asked to do these things, to try and speak, to carry on like they've always done, or to have a restraint on speech and see whether it makes any difference on their own inner attitude and sense of empowerment. That is why you can have a whole world of activists who will speak the right things, but they cannot do an iota of help in the world that one silent mystic can do, because the mystic practices these things. So the power goes so much more deeper. Now then he says, help me, because if you don't help me, then how will I know these things? So don't be disrespectful to the mind and the body. Another thing to remember is, the quieter your mind is, the closer you are to the Supreme Consciousness. For example, you think of an ant. How many legs does it have? 6 legs. You think of a centipede. How many legs does it have? 100 legs. Or more, multiple. Human being, 2 legs. Now, when you look at it, if you put a human being, a centipede, and an ant together and make them run, who will go fastest? Actually, logically, the centipede must go fastest because it has multitude of legs. It's the slowest. The ant will go second because it has 6 legs. It's less legs than centipede. Human being has only 2 legs. So the human being will go fastest. And what legs are these that human beings have? Our legs are our mind. So the rishis will say, paralyze the legs of your mind. Try and not run. Restrain yourself. When you find it difficult to restrain yourself, they give you a very ready medicine. They say, as you are inhaling, chant Omkar. As you are exhaling, chant Omkar. Om. Inhale. Om. Exhale. At that time, no other thought comes to you. So you go on doing this quietly. You don't have to do it loudly for the whole world to hear. You just inhale and exhale with pranava, and you will see that the mind will slowly start coming into a quietness. Then they say, when this happens, the viveka, you will start seeing many things that you did not see when you were reacting and talking to people. You just sit quietly. You'll find some old people in the old days. They will just be sitting quietly. They won't say anything. They'll be watching quietly. And people will go to them and say, see, I have this quarrel with my brother-in-law over land. What should I do? And they'll tell you something very wise. Because why? They have not been reacting to the whole thing. They're simply watching and they are becoming empowered on the inside. So when you practice mauna and aloneness, ekantam, your desires will slowly become less and less, the needless desires. And then you will start getting viveka. Viveka means the discrimination to see what is permanent and what is impermanent. If you know you're going to get something that will be permanently happy, and you think you're going to get something just for just a day or two, you would choose the long life thing. What you, in ordinary language, if you're going to get married to somebody and live the rest of your life in fair comfort, or you're going for a, what do they call it, a one-night stand. It's like that. Don't go for one-night stands. Go for the permanent, which is the Paramatma within you, because that Paramatma is not outside. First itself, this Upanishad starts by saying that he is nearer to you than you can even imagine, than even you know. So then they say, then the prayer is, the Shanti mantra is, that I'll speak only the truth. I will speak only the rhythm, the activity of the truth, the law that the truth obeys. And protect me and protect the speaker. Om Shanti. Now you have to remember 2 things. We are going on to today's. 2 things are needed for starting the spiritual journey. First thing is your sankalpa, your determination. It has to be beyond the determination of anything else that you want. Then only it will become predominant. If you use spirituality or religion like going to a club for a day, or just having a membership once in a week, going there, having a good time, talking to people, singing a few kirtans, saying something nice, coming back, it won't help. Because something else will replace it. That is like a one-night stand. But supposing you have a determination that no matter where I am, I may go to the ashram, I might be in the house, I might be on the battlefield like Arjuna, I might be at the point of death like Bhishma. Wherever I am, my first predominant determination is to look towards the supreme force. People have been made to be afraid by certain people in the past, saying, no, no, don't go for this. That is only for old people or people who have lost their families. Then you can go. When you're young, you should enjoy yourself. The point is, people did enjoy themselves even when they were on the spiritual path. All your rishis were married, they had children, they lived in ecologically protected areas that they protected. So, nothing in life is against spirituality if you think that these things outside you also contain the divine. You don't have to run away anywhere. Where you are, the divine is. So, this determination has to be there that I want this permanent Paramatma. And wherever I am, I will keep in mind, but this is my search. I know it on the inside. The second thing you have to have is surrender. Because no journey can happen without your will. If you don't want to go to Dharwad, whatever somebody says, even if somebody buys you a ticket to Dharwad, you'll find you're on the way to Mysore. So you have to have your will. And that will is not just, I will do it, not with your mouth, not with your mind alone. It is with your heart. It has to be a longing of your heart. And that is your samskara. And everybody has it. Only thing is lying hidden for some people. But everyone has it because we have all come from the same source. Now, then the Rishi says, I promise only to speak the truth. Now, having promised it, why is he saying, please help me, please protect me, please protect the speaker? Because by now he has had Viveka, discrimination, he knows his limitation. And he says, I am going to do my very best to speak only the truth. But I'll do all this as much as I'm capable. I know my limitation. What I say may not be fully the truth. Protect me from myself. For example, you're sitting in your house one day and you see a snake, nighttime. Then you get scared. You run out and you say, snake, snake. And some neighbors and everybody comes running in to help you, and they come and they go to the snake and they're looking at it. It's moving. Everybody is standing scared. One person who's little braver goes closer, and then he starts laughing. He says, hey, this is just a rope. The shadow looked like a snake under the fan. Now, you said snake. You thought it was the truth. It is not the truth. Your intention was right. Your perception was also right. But somewhere you got caught with the illusion of the rope being the snake, because in your mind there has always been fear of a snake. So when you see something that looks similar to the snake, you pick up that vasana without realizing. Your fear picks up that vasana and you say something which is not necessarily the truth. So the sage is saying, even though your best intention may be to speak the truth, still you need the grace above to protect you, because our mind is so tied up with illusions, because it's so huge, this truth that we are talking about, supreme being, is so vast that consciousness, you can't even imagine how vast and deep it is. It is not just not just India, not just United States, not just the earth, not just our galaxy, billions and trillions, infinite galaxies, infinite universes, all that carries the one supreme consciousness. And to understand it and to get a glimpse of it, you will feel at that time so full of happiness. And it's not happiness, they call it bliss. But the word bliss has been diluted so much these days. This is your source. So the nature of that bliss is to come and share with everybody else. So you may come running out and you want to tell people, hey, you know what I experienced? This is so wonderful. This is so terrific. They said, what did you experience? What did you experience? And I say, you just do this and you become so full of peace and happiness and compassion. You just hold it. And so they are saying, when you have that experience of truth, when I come to know, he's praying to the infinite, let me not fall into the illusion that this is the whole truth, that my journey is complete. Protect me, they are saying, so I can become aware that I only touch the ocean. I'm not holding the whole ocean in my fist. There is so much more. I don't possess the vast expanse. So the protection is for the desire that existence or this consciousness or this ultimate Paramatma that you call will surround you on all sides and move with you wherever you go. Because unless this boundlessness surrounds the truth, it will not have any value for you. It will be, that also will be a temporary satisfaction. So they say, protect me. This is what is called surrender. Why? You have made it till there, you have seen the truth, you have had a glimpse of it, you have felt the joy. But at that point, your Viveka comes in, you surrender to the whole of existence, and you are saying, I may make a mistake. Protect my sankalpa to speak the truth. You know, in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a story that when Bhishma was provoking Arjuna, and Arjuna was very emotionally attached to his grandfather, he could not fight with his grandfather the way he could have with anybody else. And slowly Bhishma was shooting arrows, and Krishna, who was the charioteer, kept telling Arjuna, come on, get up and fight, because now it's not between you and grandfather. It is between righteousness and unrighteousness. Do what you need to do. And Arjuna is faltering. So Krishna, in exasperation, gets down from the chariot, picks up the wheel of the chariot and charges at Bhishma. And Bhishma is looking so happy, and everybody is shocked because Krishna had made a promise, and Krishna is speaking the truth. He made a promise, I will not touch any weapons. I will not fight in the war. I will only drive the chariot. Then Bhishma immediately comes down and he tells Krishna, please put the wheel down. I'm very sorry. And Arjuna comes and holds Krishna's feet and he says, I will fight. You please don't break your promise. Now, why does the divine break his promise? That is the question here. And Krishna says that Bhishma was a very dharmic person. He was celibate all his life. Celibate does not mean not just having sex. Celibate means that every one of your karmendriyas and jnanendriyas are restrained because you are in search of the dharma, the truth there. With such restraint, he said, how can I make your words how can I allow you to say, because Bhishma had told Duryodhana earlier, Krishna will not pick up any weapon. He will not fight. So he says, how can I make your words come true? So I had to do this so that Arjuna would realize his mistake and he would stop me from doing it. So the divine is prepared to give up even his sankalpa for the sake of a devotee. So you can imagine, Swami Satyananda used to say that the divine will come as your servant if you have that bhakti and that sense of surrender, that he will take care, he will come as your servant. And we have had many stories of many people, even in this last century, of the divine coming as a security guard, protecting somebody, taking them to the family residence home. So there are many, many instances of the entire existence coming to the support of one person because of the caliber of that person's surrender. When you surrender, existence will support. It will not let you down. So this is the story of this is the Shanti Mantra. And now when you come to the Aitareya Upanishad itself, they talk about three or four things mainly. One is that they talk about prana. Now you will see how your pranayama comes in. This prana they are talking about is not just the small prana we are talking about when we breathe. This is called prana. Whereas the prana here they are talking about is the vital force that keeps everything alive in all the universes. It is called Mahaprana. And the first sentence they say, prana is ukta. What does ukta mean? Ukta means that which is uttered, that which is spoken, that which is said. So now we have to understand it in the context of the Upanishad. What do they mean that prana is that which is uttered, that which is said, that which is ukta? So for this, we have to go backwards to, some of you have, I took the Dashamaha Vidyas for you, and just to go back to the beginning of the Tantric and the Vedic understanding of creation itself. What they say is, in the beginning, nothing was there. And that is how the Aitareya starts also. Nothing was there except pure consciousness. Consciousness being aware of something, being intelligent about something, and just being, not acting. Now, within this, you must listen very carefully. Within that quiet, peaceful, activeless consciousness, slowly there is a stir, just a movement. And when that movement happens, there is a gathering of all its energies. You can imagine the tremendous energies that are just lying quietly. It's like if you think of a lion lying quietly after food or something, and then imagine a lion leaping to guard its pets from another intruder. See the power unleashed. So it is its own power that is unleashed in this consciousness, and it's called there is a vibration. This vibration is called spanda. Spanda means a vibration from inside. It is not something that hits it and make it vibrate. Not from outside. From within itself, there is like a tremor, a vibration, and then it explodes. That explosion comes from the word sam, which means to let loose. That is, it lets loose. You have seen some people, sometimes they'll be quiet, sitting at home, and when they get angry, they will suddenly stand up and they'll make such an explosion of anger that everybody is silenced. People can become sick also because of the power of that anger of a quiet person. Whereas a person who is getting angry every half an hour, that person has no power because you're losing your energy. So here is silence that has gathered power over millennia, that consciousness, and suddenly there is an implosion from within itself, and it lets out the force, and this force gathers the elements and becomes the entire universes. So they will not say that the supreme consciousness called Bhagavan or Paramatma or Brahm. Brahman means, from the word Brahm, means word. That is, it is as if the divine has spoken, and out of his speech, his vibration, everything has become manifested. Why? Because it has been proved that this vibration goes on and on and on, and at every level, the intensity and frequency becomes less and less, and many things are formed in a hierarchy of more the higher the frequency and the more intense certain things are invisible, then slowly, 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 slowly it becomes visible and it gets a nama and a rupa. So you are a vibration, I am a vibration, the wall is a vibration, the window is a vibration, the tree is a vibration. Everything is a vibration of the original. It's called nada. Nada means like your nadis, nadi, nad means to flow. He flows out and becomes the universe. So when he becomes the universes, that means you are a part of his consciousness. You are a part of divinity. That is what they are trying to tell the people also. And we say, oh, how can I be? I'm such a sinner. I'm guilty. I feel bad. And the sage is saying, no, you're not bad. You're just ignorant. You don't realize you have this divine power within you. What you need to do is accept it, understand it, and open yourself out to it so that you can use it for the welfare of the whole consciousness. Okay, so when they say vak or speech or something uttered, in this concept, in this context, they are talking about the sound of the consciousness imploding and throwing out itself, loosening itself, like as if it's tied up and it's suddenly become free. So that speech is what we call the Om, the Omkar in the Hindu Shastra. They call it the Amin in the Islamic scriptures. They call it the Shabad. In the Sikh language, they call it Amen in the Abrahamic Jewish tradition and in the Christian tradition. So every religion is talking about this tremendous energy that comes out with a vibration, and this is the speech. They are talking of the divine. Now this speech, they say, first it is just a like, just no sound, just a vibration. If you look at some electric wires, you can see they vibrate and they bring electricity, but you won't hear a sound unless you put your ear near it. So you have that humming. Then the 5 elements join together and they form space. Then they become energy, life energy, and they become so many objects all around in the world. So they say this speech that becomes so many objects is first invisible, para, beyond what you can imagine, your mind can imagine. It's another dimension. Then this sound slowly becomes more and more less and less, put it this way, less and less intense, less and less frequency, and this para which is beyond the para vak becomes pashyanti vak. Pashyanti vak means the sound which sees what it's going to become. Then as it goes down and becomes more less and less intense and less frequent, it becomes what is called madhyama vak. Madhyama is in between seeing and becoming. Then finally you get the Vaikari vak. Vaikari means the rough voice, that is the speech that we are talking. Now when I'm talking, this is Vaikari vak. When you're talking, it's Vaikari vak. But where is the source? When you hold on to the Vaikari vak, that is the mantra you hear, and you go on repeating the mantra, you say you're saying Omkar, or you're saying Om Namah Shivaya, or Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, whichever your mantra is. You are going on saying it, that is Vaikari vak. And you're allowing it to move everything else away in your meditation. Slowly, you're merging more and more with the Vaikari vak. Then after some time, it will go on resounding inside you even without your saying it. That is the Madhyama. And when it goes on doing it slowly, 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 you will go to finding out what it was like before it became you. Your Pashyanti work. That is when they say you see a yantra or you'll see a divinity's name, form. That happens because that is who you really are in your Sukshma state. Then you don't give it importance also. You do namaskaram to it in meditation and go on and on. Eventually it will take you to the Paravak. Paravak is God's or the Paramatma's original vibration. So they say prana or Mahaprana is Ukta. Ukta means the spoken, that which the Paramatma spoke about, not spoke about, the vibration, the first vibration, it becomes joined with prana. Prana becomes that vibration, and prana and Ukta, prana and the speech are the same of the divine. You may not understand everything I'm telling you. It doesn't matter. Just get a flavor of it. This is not for your examination. Your assignment is over. All of you have passed your assignment well. But just get a feel of it, because you don't know tomorrow when you will be interested in this and who will be there to tell you. So prana is called the cosmic life force, and Purusha is called the cosmic person. For purpose of meditation, both are identified as the same. That is why you have the Purusha Sukta, Sahasrasirsha Purushaha. That is, he has 1,000 heads. In the movies, they will show you one person, maybe some film star with 1,000 heads around. That's not what they are saying. That everything in the universe is his head. Everything that is speaking is his speech. So when you are speaking, be careful what you speak, because you are the divine speaking, and what you say will have the power to create negativity or positivity or obscenity in the universe. That is what they are saying. So this is the first aspect, that prana is ukta. That is, prana is the same as speech. Then the second one, which I touched upon just now, the Vishwarupa Darshan. When you go deeper and deeper into speech, that is the Paravak. When you go to Pashyanti Vak, you will see that everything in the universe is the same vibration in different people in different ways, in the form of light. Sound and light they're very close in vibration. So then you say, Sa idam sarvam, prana says, that is, all this is me. I never realized. So I see, my neighbor is me. The savage that you call savage somewhere in Africa, he is me. The person who is fighting somewhere, he is me. Everything is me. You see, then the Advaita Bhavana starts. When you see everything is one, then how can you at that point ever discriminate and say he is bad, I have to hurt him, he is good, I must be nice to him? That won't happen, because you see, the divine that is in you is the divine in everybody else. So they say, when you go following this Vak, which is alive with prana, slowly through your mantra, they say, go on and on. Don't say, I did 1,000 mantras, why I'm not getting the vision of God. Don't say that. It is billions of lifetimes of taking a wrong step. So when you go on and you go to this, through this prana and this Vak, you will get more and more clarity within yourself, and you get what is called the cosmic vision. That is, seeing everything as the divine vibration everywhere. That is called Vishwarupa Darshana. That is how Arjuna saw Krishna. Now, the person who has reached that level recognizes the Atman. And in the Upanishad, you must remember, they will always use Atma and Brahma, Paramatma, in the same word. Sometimes you call Atman for Brahman, sometimes it's for the Jivatman, because they are saying, they will prove it at the end, how the human being is Atma, is Paramatma. So now this person recognizes that Atma, that initial living vibration in the trees, in the herbs. How? If you plant something in the ground, it grows, no? It is helped by the earth. Earth is a Panchamahabhuta. It is helped by the water inside the earth. That is another one of the elements. It is helped by the sunshine that falls on it, another Panchabhuta, one of the Panchabhutas. It is helped by the air that brings in nourishing qualities, pollen, germinating, all that. And it is helped by space which holds it. So all these 5 elements join together, and they are nurturing and bringing up a herb or a tree as its sap. You know, when you cut a plant, you will find that watery element that is called the sap. That Atma is in the form of sap in the vegetation. Then you come to the animals, and you will see that the same Atma is in the animals as sap. How sap? Because it's blood vessels, it's the liquid inside it, plus thought. The trees and plants don't talk, but animals can think. Think to the, at least to the extreme that this person might kill me, this person will take care of me, like that. And then when you come higher, you come to man. Man has the same sap as in blood, thoughts, and intelligence. Why intelligence, they say? Because he speaks what he has known. He hears, and he hears what is true. And with our own mortal instruments, that is limited instruments like the eye and the ear and all that, the man seeks to find the immortal. So they say that man's nature, the way the Panchabhutas have joined in him, whatever he gains, he is never satisfied. By nature, man meaning man, woman, a human being, I'm saying. A human being is never satisfied whatever he gets because he seeks to go beyond it. Whatever you get, you want to do something better. You might be earning 100 rupees, then you might say, oh, why not? I get 1,000. Once you get 1,000, you won't settle down and say, enough, okay, let me get 1 lakh, it'll be okay. Then 1 crore, then many crores. And at the end, you might be the richest man in the world. You might give it all up in charity and go sit in a monastery because you want to know what is beyond this. So because he does this, he is the only one among creatures that cares about other creatures. He is capable of feeding other creatures. And you must have seen in the COVID time, so many people going out and feeding other people who did not have enough, people going out and feeding animals. The other day, there was a WhatsApp and somebody feeding birds, somebody feeding monkeys, and then going out and saying ecology matters, let us plant trees, feeding the trees. Feeding, man alone can be selfless. In no other creation will you find this going out and feeding somebody else. You might see a lion feeding its own cubs. You won't see it going around and looking for other cubs to feed. Man can go out and feed other people. And this quality is a quality of the divine. That is called a Kalyana Guna or an auspicious guna. Auspicious quality. Human being has this auspicious quality, potential in him. So he is called potential Bhagavan or potential infinity. And when he realizes this, he says, idam dra. Idam means this. Dra, I see. That is, I'm seeing this. First he said, I'm everything. Idam sarvam. Then he says, I'm seeing this. What is he saying? That he has the qualities that Bhagavan has in a smaller form. So I am a miniature Brahman, he says this. This idam dra has come to be called in the Vedas as Indra. Indra is symbolic of the enlightened mind. Then the second thing is the experiment they ask the children to do, that you sometimes a student was asked to tend the guru's cows for 1 year, karma yoga. Not asana, pranayama, meditation, nothing. Go and take care of the cows for 1 year and then come back and simply be watching what is happening. While doing this practice, which I told you yesterday about restraint of the mind, seeing when the restraint of the speech comes, seeing, do you really want to say it? Is it useful? All this. So you're doing sadhana on speech and of the mind. And the boy is going to look after the cows for 1 year. Why the cows for 1 year? Because when you're with another human being, there will be a tendency to compare and talk. And so you get distracted and diluted. But when you see a cow, the cow is very gentle. It's not like a lion. You don't have to be alert around it. You just feed it and go with it gently. You become like a cow in your consciousness. So you're simply watching without any contamination of your perception. Your past is not coming up. You're not thinking of other things. And then they say, when this boy came back, he told the Guru asked him, what did you find out? And the boy said, I found out that by prana, when one talks, and he didn't talk much except to the cows, prana enters speech. Because when you want to speak, you have to have that life force, no? Prana enters the speech. And he said the speech swallows the prana. You don't see the prana separately because the speech has taken it for expression. Does that always happen? The Guru asks him. He says, no. When I'm in deep sleep, the opposite happens. Prana swallows the speech because I'm alive and breathing, but I'm not talking. So when you are awake and you're talking, the speech is swallowing the prana. In deep sleep, the prana swallows the speech. So the boy says, I realize prana and chitta are so intimately connected. That is, the speech which comes from the mind and the prana, the life force, are so intimately connected that one follows the course that the other takes. So we say, have chitta shuddhi before speaking something. Purify yourself before saying your mantra. Then what else did he understand? Now he understands that this mutual absorption of one by the other, that is, prana swallows the speech, speech swallows the prana, gave him a feeling that there is one principle from which both have emerged. What is this principle? And this principle, they say, is like the main beam of a house. What is your house? It's your body. So, in the Vedas, they will speak about many symbolisms you won't be able to understand unless somebody tells you, and you will only know that if you have had a guru who would have taught you with an experience. Without an experience, you still won't understand. You try and see today that when you are speaking, what makes you speak? If you are feeling lifeless, you're tired, you're depressed, you won't speak much. Why? Because the prana is not there, it's low. And night when you are sleeping, the prana is there, but you don't talk in deep sleep. So he says, prana is like the main beam of the body of the house. When he says prana, he means the vak also, the vibration. And in this main beam of the house, you get other things fixed. With the main beam, you have cross beams, then one supporting beam, and then you will have a wall on it. All this comes up because there is one main beam. This main beam of this house that is the body is the prana, which is also the speech of the divine, the vak. He desires to become the universe, and his vibration becomes the universe. And to this main beam are attached the eye, the ear, the mind, the speech, the senses, all of them dependent on the pranas. Prana is the spiritual energy of man, which sustains all the other faculties that the man has. This is prana, the cosmic life force. The cosmic person. He says there are 4 purushas, 4 persons. One person is you, the person. You, me, anybody. He is called the Sharira Purusha. He has a physical body. Consciousness with its essence is a consciousness even when your body is not there. This is your Annamaya Kosha. It is your physical body that you see, in which the essence is the Atma, the conscious self. When your physical body goes away at death, the essence or the Atma still survives. That is why he is called a Purusha. One who lives in the Puri. In the Puri means the castle of the body. Then you have the Chanda Purusha. Chandaha, Chandas means a meter. In a poem, you have a meter, no? For example, you say, Om Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yona Prachodayat. There is a meter. Om, Om, Preem. There are meters. These meters are free, are what they call certain rhythmic vibrations which go in rhythm. And this rhythm is responsible for the rhythm of everything in the universe. We call in the physical body, we have a rhythm. That is, at night the body sleeps, in the daytime it is awakened, at such and such a time digestion happens. There is a rhythm for the heart, there is a rhythm for the thoughts, there is a rhythm for silence. All these cosmic rhythms are called chandas. So Chanda Purusha is the assembly of the aksharas. Akshara has 2 meanings. One, it means an alphabet and a syllable. And secondly, it means that which cannot be destroyed. Akshara means cannot be destroyed. Akshara Tritiya. That day, the Tritiya day, in which whatever you do will never be destroyed. You do good, it will become more. It will never get less or get destroyed. So Chanda Purusha means it is the assembly of aksharas which create a certain rhythm in everything in the universe. Then you have the Veda Purusha. The Veda Purusha means the Rig, Yajur, Sama Vedas. The essence of that is Brahman. Now we have to understand this. When they say the Rig, Yajur, Sama, they are not talking of the Rig Veda book, Yajur Veda book, the Sama Veda book. They are talking of the cosmic vibrations that the rishis, that was revealed to the rishis in extremely deep states of samadhi, where they moved to merge with the cosmic vibration. And in merging with the cosmic vibration, or the man, his soul, merging with the divine, the Paramatma, the original Pashyanti Vak is heard. The sound vibrations that are in space. Those sound vibrations he brings back when he is out of that samadhi, and he opens his mouth and says something. That vibration is in that sound. So your Veda mantra is not just the book, it is a vibration of the sound that has been captured by the rishi or the sage who has explored his own deeper self, realized that he is part of the Brahman, gone to a state where these vibrations have flowed into him, and with these vibrations he sees a completely different transformation of himself. Then he is itching to come back and share it. So what he shares is now being repeated or recited at the Vedic mantras. So when you do the Vedic mantras, you are trying to capture within yourself that old aksharas that are there, the Veda aksharas, the Veda mantras. So when you are chanting the Veda mantras, please remember that it is not just an academic subject like, as Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. No, it's something extremely exalted, extremely powerful. It's a great power that creates the universes. So a person who chants the Vedas must approach it with extraordinary devotion, with extraordinary humility, without thinking, I am repeating the Vedas. You say, this Rishi's voice is repeating it and my mouth is only saying the words. So when you have a Veda teacher, you treat that person with as if he is the divine, because he has brought the divine to you. That is what Kabir says, no? That if God and Guru stand before me, who do I first do namaskaram to? I do it to Guru because he has brought God to me. And that is the same also for your Vedic Guru. He's not just somebody with a panche who just comes to the ashram and gives a talk and goes off. And you think, oh, what is he doing? He started a trust. No, all that is part of the Laukika Vishaya. But his aspect of having brought the Veda to you is that it is the divine in that form that has come and put this in your mind. And the Veda Guru is a person of extremely exalted quality during the time he is teaching you the Veda. So this is the Veda Purusha. Its essence is Brahman. Then you have the Mahapurusha, the greatest cosmic person, the one in which everything exists. This essence is called Surya. In the Vedic terminology, Surya is not the sun. You say Surya Namaskar, many people say you're turning to the east and you're saluting the sun that is in the sky. No. This is the Laukika Surya. This is the Surya which is made of matter. Even this is not light. It is a fusion. But we are talking of such a Surya that has the prana, the Mahaprana, the cosmic breath and the cosmic light, which illuminates the entire universes. This sun that we see every day, like billions and trillions of suns in different galaxies get their light from that original Surya. When you do Surya Namaskar, you are doing the Surya Namaskar to that sun which is also within you, that supreme consciousness within you, which exists as light. And how does he come into you, into somebody else? He becomes you. He becomes somebody else. You see, has he become you for eternity? No. For this lifetime, he is you. It is over. He has moved on. You, the soul or the Atma, goes on to get another body somewhere else. So, so he comes in the form of time or Kala. So they say, Kala Swarupi Bhagavan. Krishna will say, I am time. What does he mean? He means that he is that consciousness which becomes your Atma. And this Atma or soul, with the combination of the 5 elements, becomes a specific body in which this Atma lives performing its karmas for a few years or many years for a certain specified time. And he comes in the form of time. And what do they say? This Surya, that supreme illumination, becomes individualized in each person. He is in you in a particular way, in me in a particular way, in the terrorist in a particular way. There is no place that he is not there. In the Shakta Tantra, you will call that form of time as Kali. So from this, they help the disciple to see that everything is Brahman, the supreme consciousness, including each created being. The Atma alone is the substance of the universe. Atma meaning the Paramatma, that one Atma. There is nothing except the Atma. Atma is pure consciousness, the self of man. Through this, you come to understand that Aham Brahmasmi or Prajnanam Brahma. This consciousness is me, in me also, and this consciousness is the whole universe and everything else. It keeps everything alive. And the entry of this Atma, then why did this Atma come into the world and into this body created by him? You were in him potentially. Why bother to create? It is so that you realize this unity of Brahman in everything around you. So, I think, how many minutes more do you have here? Do you want to ask questions?
We have 10 to 15 minutes more, Swamiji.
Okay, you want me to go ahead or you want to ask questions?
We'll just wait for a few seconds to hear from people. Otherwise, you can carry on.
Okay. Okay, maybe some people would like to ask questions on WhatsApp. That's okay. And or about the sun within us. Somebody has asked, can you expand a little more about the sun within us? The ultimate truth, how do they define the truth? The truth is Satyam. Sat means it exists. When does it exist? It existed in the past, billions and billions. There was nothing before it. It exists now, and it will exist for the future until there is no until. We don't know infinitely. So Satyam or existence, when did it exist? It existed in the past, existed in the present, it will exist in the future. That is what the Muhammad says in the Quran, and that is what the Christians call God also. God or the truth is that which was, which is, and which will ever be. That is what they say. So when is the truth there? Always. Where is the truth? Omnipresent. In everything that is created. He is in you, he is in a little grain of sand, he is in your neighbor, he is in a terrorist, he is in a saint, and he is equal in every being. He does not become partial to any creature because it is him in that creature. So omnipresent. Then what is the other quality? What is he capable of doing? He is omnipotent. Nothing moves in this universe without his will. Right from a small blade of grass that either shrivels and dies or grows and waves itself in the breeze, or a huge banyan tree, or a human being who is dying of hunger and thirst, or another person overfed, rich, poor, an animal that is a predator, an animal that is a victim. There is nowhere that he is not. He is omnipresent and he is omnipotent because out of himself he becomes all these various things. This is called Surya. Next class, I'll tell you a little more about Surya. This Surya, the most powerful, the omnipotent, all power belongs to this Surya. It's called Surya because it is light. He is self-luminous. Nothing can create light in him. By nature, he is light. And this Surya is everywhere. We don't see it because we are used to looking at a particular form of light with the ordinary eyes. If you look at animals itself, if you see a dog's, if you're going to have an earthquake somewhere, you don't know that tomorrow morning there'll be an earthquake. But the dogs might bark today itself, and then they won't eat anything. Why? Because they have to be ready to protect themselves. You can't protect yourself with a full stomach. It will go sit in a corner and you will wonder why it's acting strangely. The next day you have an earthquake and you realize the dog has sensed it. You didn't know. The same way, many instances, ordinary instances, if you have a pet in the house and the pet is happy to see you, you ask somebody who's sitting at home to see when the dog suddenly becomes alert and wags its tail and barks. And let them phone you when it happens, and you will see you would have just entered into that whole community. You have not come home. You have not even come into the apartment. You may be on the next road, but the dog will know, sense. Why? Because its vision, its hearing, all that, the decibels that it can hear, the vision that it can see is far more than the human being. The human being also had these things, but we evolved, and through evolution, we got so carried away by the other senses that we had and their sophistication, that we let go of these things. If you ask a farmer in the village, will it rain tomorrow? One time when I was in the States, somebody said, we think it's going to rain or something of that sort. I forget what it was. And I said, how do you know? They said, I saw the hedgehogs coming. That is, when you see, you start becoming aware of so many clues to life, how life is speaking to you. But we leave all this and we go simply to a machine. And there is a saying in the Upanishads, Brahma Vidya Brahmeva Bhavati. You become what you meditate upon. If you meditate on Brahman, the Paramatma, you become Paramatma. If you meditate on stress, you become stressed. If you meditate all your life on a machine, you become like a machine. You see some of the children these days, kills because they are talking all the time to the Twitter and to the videos and things like that. Parents hardly have time for them. And even if they have time, they are in a rush to go. We have chosen a way of life, not that it is right or wrong, but these are the fallouts. So this Surya can be seen when you are able to raise the awareness of your hearing, seeing, thinking, and broken the limitations of the human capacity. You have to break these boundaries and go into yet another dimension. So that is why Krishna will tell Arjuna, look at my form. He'll say, Arjuna will say, I don't see anything. He says, Dadami Divya Chakshu. I will give you the divine eye. That is, with which eye you can see me. You can't see me with the ordinary eyes. For a short time, I'll give it to you. And the minute Arjuna saw the immensity of the cosmic consciousness, he had a fright. Your walls are going away, your family is going, everything melts into everything is the same thing. You can be scared if you're not ready for it. So he says, please get back to your old form like my friend. I don't want to see this anymore. So they said, that is why people don't see these things, because you're not prepared for it. It is not that you're right or wrong or good or bad. It just means you have to learn to be patient and wait. So this is the Surya you're trying to see on the inside. It is in the form of a light, this extremely major universal consciousness becomes a tiny bit of consciousness and stays inside you. It has the capacity to shrink to that size. When you shrink, the word that is used is hra. Hra means shrink. The extremely big, huge, unspeakable sort of magnitude of the divine consciousness becomes one little thing inside you, inside each person. This is called the Hrid Lekha. That is the Hrid Lekha, or your heart, the Rekha, the line from the heart. That is one ray of that extremely great being moves into you and becomes you, who you are. So that is the meaning of the mantra Hreem. The Hreem Bijam that you do is the Maya Bijam that gives you the illusion that I am a separate individual, somebody else is a separate individual. You don't see the oneness in everything. So that is why you pray to Mahamaya to remove that illusion, so you will be able to see the divine in another person. Then you won't see another person, you'll only see the divine everywhere, including in yourself. This is called Advaita. And all this is created by that Surya within you and everybody else. And the purpose of birth is to evolve to that extent and to merge with that particular Suryatvam. So you understand the Satyam, or the reality of the universes. Anything else? Did you understand this? Does, just put that on 1 second, does Madhyama Vak correspond to the subconscious? Somebody had sent this thing. Not quite. It is even beyond that. You can say there is some correspondence in the beginning of the chitta, that the earliest memories that we have had. It has some correspondence there, but then it's that vibration that you actually feel of the mantra reverberating in you. It is much your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, your unconscious mind, all these are the creations of our ordinary mind. We don't like something in us, we push it down, it becomes unconscious mind. Then it gets a power to damage you. But this, with your ordinary mind and your meditation, you can allow it to come up, acknowledge it, accept it, and let it be. And then your whole body, your body and mind, that is, becomes conscious. There is no split inside you as conscious, subconscious, unconscious. This is a man-created situation. When the entire consciousness in your body and mind becomes one, only then you can go into meditation. Otherwise, you will be just practicing a technique that you call meditation, where you're just sitting there happily feeling good. Either you may sleep or you might think nice things or don't think of anything and then come back feeling rested and come back. But meditation has to happen as a spontaneous thing. These are like road maps, like a GPS. You have to go there, but you have to go. You can't look at the GPS and imagine that you have come from Basavangudi to JP Nagar. You can't pray to the GPS. You have to take the road and walk or come by cycle or something. So it is much beyond the mind itself. Then somebody else asked a question. It came flashed on the thing and then it went before I saw it.
So they asked, kindly elaborate on surrender.
Surrender. Oh, I thought I did. Surrender is the realization that in this huge, tremendous consciousness of unfathomable depths and power, we are one little speck. But we are an important speck because we are part of that divine consciousness. And knowing that we are part of it, and we have a certain body, a certain mind, a certain consciousness, all with limitations. And these limitations do not allow you to go deeper and meet the higher possibility of who you are. You surrender to the higher and you say, please help me to break my boundaries and come towards you. This is surrender. Now imagine a seed that you put into the ground. The seed is just one round thing. You put it slowly inside the dark soil. It puts out one little tender shoot. Now, if this seed wants to become a mango tree, that is its potential. That is like the Jivatma becoming Paramatma. It can't just sit there in the soil and say, oh, I love you so much to the mango tree, which is not even there, and then expect that it will grow into a mango tree. No. There is a struggle in the soil which is covering it completely. Imagine yourself sitting in the earth, one of the Panchabhutas, covered by the soil and trying to come up through that soil, breaking through the soil. This tender shoot has to break through that soil and come up. And when it breaks through that is the tapas. Breaks through the soil, comes up. Now it is at the mercy of anybody who might walk and stamp on it and kill it. Or it might be an animal, a cow that is going by and says, what a lovely tender shoot, let me eat it up. So you come into the universe like that seed with implicit trust that this, who I am meant to be, my potential will be actualized if I go on the right path. So you make a sankalpa to go on the right path so that your potential is is allowed to actualize itself. So you are surrendering there to the soil, to the air, to the sunshine. You're surrendering to the whole of existence. And you're saying, please help me to grow and reach my actual potential that I am destined to be. That is surrender. Supposing the seed inside says I'm surrendering to you, but in any case, I like this warm soil. Why should I come out? Let me sit here for some time. What will happen to the seed? It will wither and it will die. Supposing there's a gardener who is slowly watering and digging around. I'll come to that, Kaivalya. Who is gardener digging around helps the seed to come up. This gardener is like the guru who helps you to come up, break through, and slowly start going towards your own Purushartha. What are you meant to be? And what you are meant to be will take lifetimes and lifetimes. Because when you read it academically, you will say man has 4 Purusharthas: Kama, then Grihastha Artha, Varna Vanaprastha, Dharma, and Moksha later, Sannyasa Ashrama. Now, supposing the Atman inside you gets all the Purusharthas, you have enjoyed life the way you want to live, then you got tired of it at one time, and then you say, okay, now let me gather money or let me gather wealth. What is this wealth they are talking about? In the Veda, it's not only the wealth of money, it is the wealth that gives you power. For example, a guru coming into your life because you are a sattvic individual, you have been selfless, and the guru gives you a mantra. This is your wealth. It is far more powerful and precious than all the money in the world. Now, for example, somebody gets COVID. Suppose somebody like a very wealthy person or a powerful person, say like the Donald Trump or somebody who has all the power and money in their hands. And if that is the time for them to go, can they buy life? They can't. So, the true wealth you have is the mantra. Why is the mantra so important? Because it is a portion of the original vibration of the Paramatma or the cosmic Mahapurusha. So this is what they call wealth. When you realize that is a greater wealth, then you move towards Vanaprastha. What is Dharma? What is my Dharma? So you might think my Dharma is to be giving daan for so many people. My Dharma is to be nice to everybody. Then you've got to meditate on your Dharma there in the Vanaprastha Ashrama. Was I very nice and pleasant to people because I cared for them? Or because I wanted to get brownie points? Or because that's the only habit I know, just being nice to people, even if I'm getting irritated on the inside. So you go deeper and deeper and deeper. What is this wealth all about? This is what the Chandi part is about. The king and the Vaishya, which I'm going to talk about nearing Dashra. So you know the value of things. So you're moving towards a dharma that will help you keep the value of things stable inside yourself. With that dharma, you go towards moksha as a sannyasi. And every person will someday be a sannyasi, not by wearing a geru dress and wearing a rudrakshamala and then walking around with with the head that is shaved. Swami Satyananda used to say that. That is not sannyas. That can be. What is sannyas? Sannyas is a total surrender. Samyak nyasa. Samyak complete. Nyasa surrender. Having realized what dharma that you need to do to keep the divine stable, then you tell the divine, just like in this Upanishad, you say, look, I want to be there with you. You are the eternal beloved. You will be permanent. You will be established in me. But I might make a mistake here or there. Please save me from myself, from my inner desire, even of desiring you until that end. Because I might be mistaken. I might see the person and I might say, oh, this is my guru, I must be with my guru. But you have to reach a point where the guru is a tattva. It's not a person, it's a tattva. That person carries that tattva and gives it to you. That's why Guru always says, I'm like a postman. You don't run behind the postman and say, hey, come and stay in my house. Let me come and stay in your house and we'll live happily because you gave me a $100 bill from somewhere. You don't say that, no? So you have to understand what dharma is. What does it mean, a guru? What is the meaning of yourself? Who am I? You have to walk that walk. There is no way around it. And slowly, 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 the whole universe will support you. Why? Because the divine has come in your form. He wants to be like you. So why do you want to be somebody else? People will, I remember long, long ago, I met one person who was, I could say, my first teacher, almost like a guru. He was a psychiatrist. And he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? Not that I was very young, but still. I said, I would like to be like Krishna. I like the qualities that he could do so many different types of work, and yet at the same time not be attached to anything. So he laughed. He said, why do you want to be like Krishna? Why don't you be like who you are? Every person has the potential. Why do you want to be somebody else? The divine is in you. You bring out the divinity within you, like Krishna brought it out within himself. So this is what you have to be eventually, because you are divine. That is why they call you Arya Putra. Arya means what? The mother, Lokamata. She is the one who is the only person fit to be called Arya, one who cannot be destroyed, and one who is the only person eligible to be worshipped in that sense. As a child of that Lokamata, you're called Arya Putra. That is what you are. Now, somebody just asked a question. It was in my mind and it went off. Can you just flash that question again, please?
Yes. So Swamiji, one was on surrender. The second one is Purushartha required even after your surrender?
Yes, because you still have the prarabdha karma of your physical body. You have, when you have surrendered, not just surrendering, your surrender has to be established in you, and the divine has to be actualized within you. When the divine is actualized within you, then what does the divine do? He becomes a servant of everybody else who is struggling. That is why Krishna comes and drives a chariot for Arjuna. He would go in the morning and do namaskar to Yudhishthira as an elder brother. So your Purushartha should be there. Because now it will not be your Purushartha, it will be the divine who is working through your hands, working through your mouth, working through your feet. You are giving him a place, a body to work through. Because all of creation is who he is. He's not just you. You don't finish and wipe your hands and walk off. You have been supported by the universe. Now is your time to support the universe. So it goes on and on round. And somebody else also asked some other question, Shivani. Last one. Yeah.
Yes. Swamiji, please let us know some basic book which covers the terms explained.
Very easy, very cheap. It's with you always. Your body and your mind. That's why I said, Jnana Yoga, you are the book. The rishis carried themselves across. They didn't have books. They were exploring. Their laboratory was their body and mind. And that is who you are meant to be. You will get a bit of this in one book, bit of that in another book, bit of something else in another book. Then you will join it with what is already inside you and you'll say, oh, so this is what it was. When I experienced this thing, it is because that happened. So it's like fitting a jigsaw puzzle. And when you become very earnest and you're doing these things, then when the whole of universe says this person is earnest, he is an Aryaputra, let us go help him, then a Sattvic being like a guru comes into your life and gives you a push upwards. Then you continue. So there is no book which will give you all these facts. Facts are not important. These little things that I'm telling you will be found in many books. You'll have to search many books. But best is to go to the origins of the mystics. I personally prefer to go to the books of, not the books that are used in teaching techniques, but in the books that will tell you the biographies of the mystics of the past. For example, you look at Krishna's life in the Bhagavatam. Don't just read it as stories. Look at it, there is some message there, read it. You become part of Bhagavatam. You go into the book and you say, let me be part of a character here. Let me see what is happening, living with the Bhagavatam. You live with the Bible. You can live with Muhammad. You can live with any of these people inside the books that have come out as books. And slowly, what is your book will be revealed. It's a very fascinating journey. What is the point if somebody tells you everything, then you sit and write it down and you don't know what it is? Then you'll say, is there a God or not? I don't know. This book says there is, that book says there isn't. Where do you go? So I think you're all fantastic students, especially this particular group that has been coming again and again. And surely the Paramatma, you have woken the Paramatma up within you. So now you just keep carrying on doing what you're doing with great alertness and awareness. And sometime you will reach. You can't go anywhere else. Where else can you go where there is no Paramatma? Go to Sri Aurobindo's book, go to Osho, go to Swami Satyananda, go to Swami Niranjan, where they talk about their personal experiences, learn through it. And that is what is meant by Upanishad, sitting next to the Guru. The Guru is not in the book. The Guru is not in your idea. That is why you are saying, protect me, because my idea may be wonky. That is why if you see many times when you see somebody sends a photo of Swami Niranjan and somebody would write in that how inspiring or how lovely it is, how wonderful he looks and all that, you will find I do not write any comments at all, because you are mistaking the external for the internal. That internal is within you. If you are a devotee of Shirdi Sai Baba, Shirdi Sai Baba is within you. For example, you are looking from here at the moon in the sky. Now, after some time, you go inside. You know the moon is in the sky. How do you know? Because you have brought that moon and put it in the memory of your mind. You have taken it from there and it is in your mind. So you brought it into yourself. And that is the way you must sit for meditation. Visualize your Guru or your Ishta Devata or the Mantra Devata sitting in front of you, smiling. And in front of this Mantra Devata, how can you get bored? The Mantra Devata is there, and that consciousness, that luminosity of that Devata is surrounding you. Become intimate with that energy. Then that energy will be in you, woken up in you. It is already there. It just needs to be woken up. We don't reach that point because we have always been taught that we are not good enough and God is somewhere up there beyond our capacity. That is a way society used it to protect society's limits, not for an individual person. That is also necessary. Otherwise, everybody will say, I am God, I can go and kill you. You see, so that is for society's purpose. You are not part of society. You are Aryaputras and Aryaputris. You go ahead with confidence. Who can stop you? You have to be fearless because your trust has to be complete. That's all I can say. Because when you're going on the path, don't look for people to come and say, wow, you're a saint, how wonderful you are, you're inspiring me. Some people will come and tell you, you're an idiot, you're creating problems everywhere. They crucified Jesus, no? They poisoned Buddha. So when you are seeking the truth, there will be many, many negative forces around you because you are creating a sort of imbalance in the law of nature. But nature has created you to make that imbalance, and it will support you. But for the ignorant, they will feel you're a danger and they will try to bring it down. So you have to be fearless. The Satyam has to matter so much to you that nothing else should come in your way. So is that enough for today?
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you so much. Because when I talk to you, I'm talking to myself also every now and then. So next Saturday, is it?
Yes, next Saturday, 4 p.m. same time.
Same time. And we'll finish.
4
Thank you everybody for being here. Hari Om.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Swami. Hari Om.
Thank you.